Pro-life rallies and Christian church services are being disrupted, and now pregnancy care centers and pro-life offices are being vandalized and even destroyed. How do pro-lifers prepare ourselves for the storm that is upcoming with the overturning of Roe versus Wade? Stay tuned and have a conversation with Mark Harrington of Created Equal. Hi, folks, and welcome back to the Pro-Life Guys podcast. My name is Cam Côté, and I am your host. For those of you who have been longtime listeners, this is my first episode without my wonderful colleague, friend, and up until now co-host, Peter Boss. Unfortunately, Peter Boss has taken the next step away from the Pro-Life Guys podcast. He is no longer one of the hosts here. He is moving on with his wife into a next chapter of his life. And it's really sad. I got to admit, I have grown to appreciate and love Peter in a very brother in Christ kind of way over the last 2 years working with him on the podcast. I've had the opportunity to work with him with CCBR for eight years or so now. I remember almost 6 or 7 years ago now, he came to Calgary to work with me for about 3 weeks as he was taking on some more leadership in our Eastern office and get some mentorship on how to lead one of the offices out there. So it's been an absolute joy working with Peter. Can't say enough about him as a man, as a incredible brother in Christ in the movement. And so I wish him and his family all the best in this next chapter of their life. And for those of you who are new, this is a show. I'm a pro-life guy, and the Pro-Life Guys podcast is passionate and dedicated to equipping you with the tools that you need to have compassionate and compelling conversations about abortion so that you can change minds, save lives, and transform our culture. And with that, we have obviously tons of content here on the podcast. You can find us on all your social media platforms as well. And you can go to our website, prolifeguys.com, and check out the merch section if you want to get some sweet Pro-Life Guys content like drinking vessels, like the t-shirts that Peter and I have been wearing on and off for the last little while. But without further ado, I want to get into today's topic because this was really not even on my radar tremendously until Mark Harrington, executive director and founder of Created Equal. We've had him on the program before to talk about how to survive and thrive within the pro-life movement as a full-time, part-time, or long-time volunteer. We've had him on the show before, but he posted on Instagram yesterday, I want to say, time of recording, about with the escalating violence happening directed towards pro-lifers and pro-life organizations in America, if you need help preparing yourself for the upcoming storm, he's there to help. Groups like Created Equal, groups like the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform, or CCBR, the one that I work for, we have been doing proactive pro-life outreach for a very long time, and we have developed a very rigorous security protocol to ensure that our team members and the members of the public are as safe as possible with all of the events that we are conducting. So that we can have these productive conversations about abortion. That polarization and violence don't serve anyone, particularly not the pro-life movement. We're here not because we view abortion advocates as enemies, but rather because we want to collaborate with everybody around us so that we can solve problems without killing innocent humans. We obviously need to start by demonstrating the fact that these are innocent humans that we're talking about, but building on that, we need to flow into conversations about how, recognizing that human life begins at fertilization and all humans get human rights, we need to have better solutions for the legitimate and very, very dire situations that so many mothers and fathers are faced with. These problems demand solutions. However, that solution can't involve killing an innocent child. And so we have had a very extensive security protocol for a very long time. This is traced back all the way to CBR in the States with Greg Cunningham. We imported a lot of his protocol. We've developed it and augmented it and enhanced it as necessary and as relevant. But I think that it's valuable to dive into this, particularly right now, because as some of you might have seen, we are experiencing a spike in pro-abortion violence directed towards pro-lifers and pro-life organizations in the anticipation of the overturning of Roe versus Wade with the Dobbs versus Jackson Whole Health Supreme Court ruling, which we're anticipating to be delivered at some point in June. Some of you may have seen the articles. I'll post them in the show notes, shared from Live Action, about how on the night of June 6th, the Compassion Care Pregnancy Services Center, pregnancy care center that is literally dedicated towards helping moms and dads who are in crisis pregnancy navigate what they're going through with material and other support. This facility in Buffalo, New York, was firebombed by abortion advocates. It was claimed by the pro-abortion terrorist organization Jane's Revenge. I don't want to give them too much airtime. I'm going to mention them a little bit through the episode. But this act of terrorism, thankfully, nobody was hurt. It happened overnight, so there's no clinic staff or volunteers or moms or dads present when the explosions went off and the fires ensued. However, the center is destroyed. We're seeing footage of it and seeing pictures, as you'll see in the link below in the description. This place was absolutely annihilated. And this is something that it's important for pro-lifers not to accept, not to embrace, but to prepare for. This isn't a matter of we need to pack up shop and go running for the hills. We've known for a long time that abortion advocates, if people are willing to dismember, decapitate, and disembowel preborn children for the sake of whatever they're going through, whether it's a selfish passion and desire or whether it's a crazy situation that they find themselves in, if they're willing to go to those ends, many of those people may be willing to go to ends to defend that access as well. And so this isn't fear-mongering. This isn't about how to dig some 2-mile deep bunkers in North Dakota or anything like that. This is how do we function as a pro-life movement with prudence, with courage, and with intelligence in this time to ensure that we are putting ourselves in the best position possible so that we can continue our pro-life outreach. And so I'm joined by Mark Harrington, Executive Director and co-founder of Created Equal, who's done a tremendous amount of support here. Definitely want to encourage you to check out this interview. And if you have any questions, I'll get to some contact info at the end as well, but you can absolutely touch base with either Mark Harrington or myself, depending on where you live, and we can hopefully give you the best advice possible for you and your group so that you can safely continue doing your life-saving pro-life ministry. So tune into this episode. It was a really, really fascinating episode, so please do. Mark Harrington, thanks so much for joining the show again. How's life with you?
Things are great. We're looking forward to the imminent overturning of Roe versus Wade here in America. I'm counting on it. And if I'm predicting this right, I need to go to Vegas because I think it's going to happen on June 27th. We'll be in Washington if it does.
June 27th. Mark your calendar, folks. It's going to be one of those like baby birth announcement sort of things where everyone in the office takes down dates. And so certainly there's obviously a ton of excitement, a ton of energy around the imminent overturning of Roe versus Wade. But Mark, as some of those in our audience are probably a little bit familiar and some may have just heard as I gave the introduction here, there's a growing maybe sense of apprehension or just kind of curiosity around increasing violence in the pro-abortion movement directed towards pro-lifers. And I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of a overview of what you've seen happening. You're in the midst of it. You're one of the most active pro-life groups out there. What are you seeing? What have you heard? What do we need to be aware of?
Well, a lot of folks were predicting riots, like we saw in 2020 across America for over 100 days. That didn't happen when the draft was leaked, the Alito draft on the Dobbs decision, which I kind of figured it wouldn't be like that. But there were protests around the country, and there were random acts of violence and vandalism and that kind of thing. But I didn't really expect it to look like it did in the summer of 2020. And so that's a good thing. I mean, it could have been worse. But since then, I've noticed that they're getting more bold. They're calling for a summer of rage. That's not a good thing. That doesn't sound good to me. They're planning on blocking or shutting down Washington, D.C. on Monday. That doesn't sound good either. So, we're seeing the rhetoric start to ramp up. And that's concerning to me. Of course, if you've been following, there have been some of the PRCs, one in Buffalo. I think there was one just the other day. One in Buffalo was actually firebombed. There's been several have been vandalized. So, unfortunately, that's a concern. I think you're going to see more of that when it comes to facilities being attacked. And then we had yesterday the news that a man was arrested in Washington, D.C. for plotting to assassinate Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And I think that one's when I went, uh-oh, we're in a whole different realm now. It's time to really take serious the threats that are coming our way. And so that's why I put out a little blurb out to everybody saying, hey, if you're concerned about security, I'm not an expert per se on the fact that I've had to deal with this over the last 15 years, let me know. And so I've been talking to people around the country what they can do to try to protect themselves, their facilities, and their people.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you posted that. I saw it on Instagram. It dawned on me right away of like, this would be phenomenal to get out to our audience, to the general public, for people who might not know where their organization, like, do we need to talk to Mark about security? What do we need to know? For a lot of groups, security might have been not even on their radar for the longest time. Maybe they're not incredibly invested into direct outreach. Maybe they're mostly a pregnancy care center, and this intuitive idea of who could hate a pro-life pregnancy care center. We are literally here to help underprivileged moms and their families, and who could ever be upset with that? And yet, I don't want to give them too much airtime because I don't think that's going to help a whole lot. But Jane's Revenge, this pro-abortion group that has put out this calling for every pro-life organization to disband in the next, I think you have like 20 days left. I don't know if you guys have set plans to disband yet, Mark, but I'm assuming not.
We're going to add a year for every day that they told us we needed to disband. We'll add that to how long we're going to be around.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And yet I'm sure that there's a few people that saw this on Twitter and saw, oh my goodness, maybe this isn't what I signed up for. Maybe this isn't what I wanted to get involved with when I got involved with my local pro-life group. Is this something that we should heed? Is this something that, for the protection of all human life, we should heed? I'm sure that you've probably got a quick one-liner on not heeding that advice to close your doors and whatnot. But what is a pro-life group? How do they start the conversation with their team, whether their board of directors, their management team, or even their volunteer team? If it's just a volunteer-led group, what are the first few things that they need to keep in mind when they start approaching the question of security?
Yeah, well, I reference our president who said it's going to get real, and it's going to get real. And these are the days that we've been hoping for, in the fact that we're going to overturn Roe, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
So preparing for that day, we've done that here. A lot of groups haven't, but it's not too late, and they need to get down to business and do some basic things. We're not talking about getting paranoid about all this. We're talking about taking some practical steps to secure your facilities and other things and your people in the event that you might be a victim of vandalism or even worse. Yeah. So that's what we've done here. Every contingency you can't predict. You just got to do the basic stuff. And if you do that, then you've done what you can do. Beyond that, hey, listen, we can't predict everything. We can't make a plan for every single contingency out there. But there are some certain things that we know that they may attempt, and those are the things we can protect ourselves against.
Absolutely. And maybe let's start diving into that. And let's start by looking at organizations like yours and ours, Mark, where groups that are proactively visible on campuses, on street corners, that sort of thing. Maybe you don't have a super public office. Maybe you do. We'll get into the office kind of setup and how to secure the office in a little bit better way. But for groups like ours, Mark, that are going out on street corners, proactively putting ourselves into situations where we're looking to encounter and have meaningful conversations with people, what are some tips that you guys have done? I know that we've got some security measures, but I'd love to kick off where you're at and then maybe throw some ideas back and forth on things that we've done. How do you equip your teams that are going out to a campus or a street corner to make sure that they are as safe and as able to follow up with any incident that might occur as possible?
Yeah, well, we've like you, we've learned by doing this over the years. Yeah. So, and we've just kind of accumulated what we call a standard operating procedure when it comes to outreach. And there's some basic things you need to do. And the first is just situational awareness. That is, when you land, meaning when you drop your people off for an outreach, just be aware of your situation. Have someone designated to be your security person.
Exactly.
They don't have to be a professional. All they have to be is eyeballs on the area in which you're doing the outreach, and that's their main role. Now, a lot of organizations can't provide that because they just don't have enough folks. So you have to train your people to be able to do both. And that means conduct the outreach, but also keep those eyeballs like this and then go back to your subject. So we teach our folks to constantly keep their head on a swivel, to just be monitoring the situation, but don't lose, touch with the person you're talking to. If you're lucky enough to have someone that can actually just do the security, by all means, that's great. Otherwise, you're just going to have to learn to do a couple things at the same time. But the situational awareness is the most important thing. Even before that, if you're going into a place that you've never been before, we do a lot of reconnaissance. We do it online. We'll look at Google Earth. We'll drop the little man down there and look around and make sure that we're all good and where we're going to be. We may even make a physical, visit to the location prior to, just to kind of scope it out. These are all things you can do just to make it a lot simpler for when you get there. What we don't want is surprises, something that you could have predicted if you would have gone, or if you would have done the extra thing or extra step. We don't want surprises. Now, you can't predict everything, but there are a lot of things you can figure before you go if you just do the advanced work. Mm-hmm. And so that's the first thing, just situational awareness.
Gotcha. I think that's so helpful. And one of my favorite lines to share with our interns, especially, we have a group of about a dozen interns here in Calgary right now. One of my favorite lines, it sounds so simple and almost borderline dumb, that I say over and over and over again, is nothing ever happens until it happens. You never need to be ready until you need to be ready, because you might be sitting there, if you're the dedicated security person and you're standing over to the side, keeping an eye on everything, and you've been standing there for 45 minutes, you can't afford to lose your attention and pull out your phone and check your fantasy baseball stats or anything like that, because you never need security until you need security. And I guess to mine a little bit further into that, one thing that I'm sure you and I would assume goes without saying, but probably should be said, is the value of security cameras. When you say having a security person, we're not just talking about somebody over in the corner twiddling their thumbs. We're talking about having somebody with a dedicated camera. Maybe, like you said, if your group doesn't have enough people to have a dedicated camera, I've seen members of your team wearing GoPros so they can capture events. I saw an instant that you guys had, partly an instant, partly just a really unsavory interaction that you guys had with some people at a high school, where a security guard was not going to jump in and she was spewing all kinds of vitriol and pushing people. The value of that camera in follow-up and preventing more incidents. Let's talk a little bit about how cameras and recorded footage have been able to help you and your team in following up with incidents. And so it's not just hearsay, but rather being able to present evidence on an incident, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. To back up just a hair here, what you were talking about is normalcy bias. That's what security people talk about. And I have people come to me and say, well, it's never happened before. And I'm like, well, that's the reason why we should pay attention, because once it happens, you better be prepared to deal with it. So just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it's going to happen. Our government has a saying, this happened after 9/11, that was, if you see something, say something. Profiling people, looking for people that don't fit in, that might just look a little bit odd. Make sure you're contacting and letting people know, hey, keep your eye on that guy. When it comes to video, that's key. Whether you can wear a GoPro, which we do, and all of our staff and volunteers wear them if we can get them each one. But if you don't, have somebody with a camera that's prepared to, turn it on and film in the event that something goes down. Now, that sometimes can be too late. If you can have a camera and have it running all the time, all the better. But we have found that, as far as it goes, that acts as a deterrent. If someone sees a camera, they're less likely to act out violently or vandalize your stuff. If they see you wearing one, more than likely, they're less likely to do it. Now, in today's world, that doesn't matter as much as it used to. But still, that is a deterrent. The other thing is, if you're going to prosecute, which we suggest you do heavily, if something happens, You have to have film. If you don't have film, you don't have a case. That's just the way it works today. If you just report this to the police and you have no video, I got news for you. They're not going to do nothing. They're not going to do anything about it for the most part. So video is very important to document what happened, be able to give that over to law enforcement, and then they can prosecute the case. So it's so key to have video. I get people call me up and say, hey man, this just happened to me at the abortion clinic, and they'll tell me the story, and I say, do you have video? No. Well, I'm not sure I can help you a whole lot here. Next time, have video. It pays for itself in spades.
Totally. And that video, whether that's a dedicated like camcorder, you don't need to have a $2,000 television set camera. I mean, we have all of our team members pull out their cell phones. As soon as an incident happens, safely pull out your cell phone so that you can get as much coverage of an incident as possible.
And now in the U.S., and I want to make a point here, in the U.S., we had this the other day with the video you're talking about. There are laws regarding videotaping and recording. In some states in the U.S., you have it's a one-party state or a two-party state. If it's a one-party state, only one person has to be aware of the filming. That's you. Yeah. That's okay. Some states like Maryland, it's a two-party state, so they have to the person you're filming or others have to be aware of the fact that you're filming. The fact that you're wearing it on your chest is enough. The fact that you're holding it up is enough. You don't have to say, hey, by the way, I'm filming you. No, they know it by seeing the video. So even in two-party states, as long as you've got that video or a camera, what have you, visible to the public, you're probably okay, legally speaking.
Yeah, and it's always an interesting question when you have somebody that comes up to you and says, please stop videoing me, to just throw back of like, are you planning on doing something? Because I feel like I should be extra videoing you right now. So no, absolutely.
Exactly. And the standard line, and I imagine it's like this in Canada, but you lose a reasonable expectation of privacy in a public area. And that's our standard line. If somebody comes up and objects to videotaping, we say, listen, you don't have the right to tell. You're in a public area, therefore you relinquish your right to privacy, so to speak. If you don't like it, just leave the area. That's how it works. So we're as far as legally speaking, we can videotape in a public space.
Absolutely. One last thing I'm going to say on the video before I move into a little bit about people versus property. Be smart about how you do your videoing. Make sure that you're capturing the incident. You don't need to be 2 miles away, but also let's make sure that we're not like ramming a camera up into somebody's face, because a camera can prevent escalation until people get super defensive because you've rammed something into their face, and now they're getting defensive and pushing back against you. And so let's just be smart.
Sometimes they get mad. They get more mad about the fact that you're videotaping them than you're displaying abortion victim photos. I mean, so that you're right. That can escalate things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, cool. So let's move into kind of the second of 4 that I want to bounce off of you. And that's just maybe a quick note on people versus property. I mean, you've done hundreds of different street corner displays with signs that you're holding, signs that you're standing beside. I'm sure that you've had your sign stolen at least a few times, and I'm sure that you would rather not have your sign stolen. What is kind of your policy on how much you're going to try to wrestle a sign from somebody? How much are you going to chase somebody down? And what is the balance between protecting your people and protecting your property, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Obviously, we tell our people, you have the right to protect yourself. And we train our people as best we can in self-defense. And those are defensive moves to prevent or at least stop an attack and then flee. And we can get into that a little bit. But so you can protect yourself. You have the right to do that. Obviously, we would want someone to do that. But when it comes to property is expendable to us. I mean, these signs don't cost that much. Even if they did, I wouldn't want someone to put them at personal risk to protect a sign that cost us about $50. It just doesn't make sense. So if somebody goes about trying to destroy a sign, steal a sign, we don't intervene physically to stop them. Now, we will politely ask them to stop, and we will notify law enforcement to come out and hopefully apprehend them. But if the law enforcement ends up showing up late and the person's gone, I mean, we don't pursue them. We used to a little more than we do now, but we don't pursue them because, again, that can lead into additional concerns security-wise, where you have a couple people going off-site to follow someone, and then, you have no way of knowing how they might react if they're being followed. So, unfortunately, we lose a lot of signs. We just had one vandalized today, and I tell our people, do what you can, document it. We got it on film. In some cases, we'll notify the police and file a report. And we don't do it every time. We used to do it every time, but be honest with you, it just came down to the fact that it was too much. I mean, we're constantly filing these reports, dealing with courts and prosecutors, and when all's said and done, most of the time, they never got punished.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I don't want to telegraph that to our other side, but I mean, to say, hey, come vandalize our stuff, you're not going to get punished for it. But that is the truth of the matter, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it's infuriating, obviously, to have that as the case. And yet, like you said, regardless of whether it gets followed up on or not, having that record is so valuable, because especially we've had it a few times in Vancouver, actually, where we've had the same person come and vandalize our signs on multiple occasions. And maybe nothing ended up being prosecuted after the first occasion, but thankfully after the second and third occasion, this became not a quote unquote act of the moment or an act of emotion or something like that. Act of passion, I guess, is often the lingo, but no, this is a premeditated. This person comes out whenever we're on this corner. They're a business owner and they're going to vandalize our sign. This is premeditated. This is not done under passion. And having that record of, no, here's him doing it on May 31st, and here's him doing it on July 2nd, and here's him doing it again on August whatever, can really help build your case.
We're not going to fight every battle, and we're not going to die on every hill. I mean, somebody just walks by and knocks over your sign, don't call the police. I mean, just put the sign back up and ask them to behave themselves.
Exactly.
I mean, that's really, because it just happens too often to distract us and get us away from the main reason we're there.
Yeah, absolutely. And anecdotally, I'll just to share an anecdote before we move into the next one about the value and when to and when not to possibly prosecute. Just an anecdote on protecting your people over signs. We had an incident a couple years ago, unfortunately, where we had one of our volunteers really try to hang on to a sign, and this turned into a wrestling match. And unfortunately, this girl fell down, and thankfully she didn't fall into the road, but she was really close to falling into the road. It was at a downtown area, and so there's no fast moving traffic or anything, but that's just, you never think, and obviously you're not thinking about pushing somebody into traffic or anything like that, but you never know when somebody's going to lose footing or something like that. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth trying to hang on to, like you said, a $50 or $100 sign when
and I would say the other thing, it's just not a good look, because if this gets reported in the media, guess who they're going to blame? The pro-life activist, not the abortion activist that came and trashed your stuff. So we're always going to get blamed for this kind of thing. That's why we teach our people passive, nonviolent resistance. Don't intervene when it comes to equipment and our signs and so forth.
Yeah, and maybe that's a fantastic transition into just a quick note on what do we mean by that? Because obviously, as I mentioned off the top in the intro of this episode, we're against all abortion-related violence. We're not out here trading blow for blow. We're not getting revenge or anything like that. Every group is going to go about their self-defense a little bit differently. But you had mentioned off a couple moments ago that idea of enough force to free yourself and to flee, basically. Is that kind of the policy that you guys run with?
Yeah, we've put our people through a basic self-defense course, which is the ability to just protect your vital, your head and everything, and then be able to get free from the attacker. Basically, not offensive moves, completely defensive moves. The issue with this is we are not trained self-defense people. I mean, we just want to protect ourselves and not get hurt. Yeah. And so that's all we do. We have somebody come in and train us for that. But it's all about muscle memory, as you know. I mean, if this doesn't happen, and thank God it doesn't. But
Yeah.
we need people to be able to react if it does. So every semester we have a little bit of we regroup and go back through the basics, and so that we're at least familiar with some of the tactics you can take to defend yourself and get free from an attacker.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the policy that we'll take up here. And if anyone has any further questions, I'm sure they can reach out to you or our group, depending on where they're at.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I mean, we're talking about organizations. So, I mean, we were able to afford a GoPro. We have signs that are dispensable. We can pay for somebody to come in and train us. If you're just an activist that goes out, you might be able to get a GoPro, but if you don't, you got a phone.
Yeah.
The signs, we'll give them to you for free if you need them, right? And when it comes to self-defense, go on YouTube.
Yeah.
Go onto YouTube and watch these, and then practice them yourself if you have to.
Yeah.
There are plenty of stuff out there available. I can send links to people on basic self-defense moves, and at least you have some idea how to respond.
Exactly. And leave the street fighting to after hours, not with abortion advocates. That can be with your older brother, your younger sister, or whomever sort of thing. We're not doing anything crazy WWE style or anything like that. So,
right.
Cool. One more before we move into protecting your kind of place of work, if that's made available, or even if it's not, I guess. And maybe just a thought on the importance at times of prosecuting, because I think there's a couple factors that we've spoken through about this. I don't know if it's some version of Stockholm syndrome or something like that, where sometimes we just feel bad of, what, this kid, they're in high school, and yes, they punched me in the eye, and yes, they broke my sign, but I just feel bad for the kid. I don't want to send him to prison. I'm not going to pursue any kind of legal repercussion. That might sound good, but there's a few reasons why it is actually really valuable at times to pursue not only police intervention, but also legal recourse to prevent this from happening again. Maybe speak a little bit to that, Mark, if you could.
Yeah, to us, it's an art, not a science. There isn't a one size fits all. Example, we're at the University of Maryland. Student knocks over a sign, couple of them in a row, and the police apprehend them. They're standing there with the police. I'm standing there with the woman. She looks remorseful. No damage to the signs. They look at me and say, "Do you want to file a complaint?" And I just asked her, I said, Are you sorry for what you did? And she said, yes. Will you never do it again? And she said, yes. And I said, all right, then please just respect our rights to free speech, just as we respect yours. And we're done. But that could have, if you take a one size fits all, we would charge them. So we just have to kind of work it out. If they're if they're sorry for what they've done, we've had them even write out a letter apologizing, and in some cases we've dropped the charges.
Yeah. Gotcha. That makes sense. And I think it's important to keep in the back of our minds that something, whether it's a written response, something like that is valuable. At the very least, having the police involved, especially for more major instance. We have instance broken into 6 different levels at CCBR, and different levels are going to require a different degree of engagement. But part of it is that if somebody can come by and punch you in the nose, and there's no repercussion afterwards, then this isn't about whether or not you're willing to have your nose punched in. This is about the person after you, because maybe you are, but maybe the next person isn't. And if I can get away with punching one person in the nose, then maybe next time I punch the whole group in the nose and I get into a big fist brawl with everybody. This isn't just about reputative justice and locking people up in prison because we want to fill up our penitentiaries. No, this is about protecting our team, and protecting our team especially in the future, because sometimes people are emboldened by, okay, well, I got off scot-free by doing that. Maybe I can get away with even more, something like that. It's worth keeping in mind not only what you're willing and able to endure, but thinking about the future of the movement as well, and whether we are setting a precedent that it's okay to harm pro-lifers, or if it's not okay, and that we can't agree with this going forward. Yeah?
Yeah, I definitely need to send a signal to those who might do this, that if they do it, they're going to be charged.
Yeah.
And so, but again, you got to kind of weigh the options there when it happens as to whether you want to pursue it or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Let's switch gears a little bit, Mark. Let's talk a little bit about facilities because I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
your office is posted publicly, but regardless of whether you've got a big banner out front of your office saying local pro-life group or not, whether
Yeah.
you work from
Yeah.
home, whether you do anything like that, what kind of
Yeah.
security precautions are worth bearing in mind for groups that want to make sure that they're safe in their place of office and place of work?
Yeah, well, the thing is with the PRCs, they are public. They do list their addresses. And I think in part that's why you're seeing them being attacked here in the US. A lot of organizations like ours do everything we can to not publish our location for obvious reasons. So if it's possible for you to remain, kind of anonymous, if you will, and not on the internet with your address, by all means do that. And we also try to scrub any information where someone might be searching for it. Now, if somebody wants to find it, more than likely, if they work hard enough, they might. But we don't want to make it easy. So we do what we can to not list it online. I think just basic stuff. I mean, this is just like securing your own home. Do you have good locks? Right? Do you leave the door open or unlocked? Bad idea. I mean, keep it locked for sure. If someone comes and knocks on the door, don't let strangers in the building. I mean, even if they look like they're delivering a package. No, they should stay outside until you confirm who they are. Don't let them inside. If you can get security cameras, by all means. Nowadays, you can buy them cheap. Ring and other devices are fairly inexpensive. Just basic cameras will help. Lighting matters, something like that. The more light, the better, especially if people are going to try to vandalize the building. Beyond that, card access, those kinds of things, that's a little bit more expensive. Alarm systems, I think, are important to protect the building when you're not here from burglary. Uh, Window coating that keeps the window from being shattered. If you notice lately, what they've done is they busted windows and thrown a Molotov cocktail in to torch it. So those are some of the steps you can take, with electronic security. But it's just like trying to secure your home, secure your building as best you can.
Yeah, and try to make sure that you don't have a single person working in the office late at night.
I think
Intuitive
so.
things, right? That
Yep.
make sure that you're in a safe spot, just like at your house. You're probably not going to be inviting all of the neighborhood into your house while it's just you and your young child in there alone. You're going to take precautions, like you said. I think there's a
Right.
ton of wisdom in that.
Yeah. And when you arrive for work, look around. When
Yeah,
you leave for work, look around. Lock your car. These are simple things.
yeah,
One of the things we've been telling our people when we're shooting video inside the building, don't disclose the inside,
mm,
how the building actually looks.
yeah,
Do things where you're not providing someone who might be trying to do you harm
yeah,
information.
exactly.
Assume that everything you're publishing is going to be looked at by someone who could do you harm. And so if you do that, again, you've taken the basic precautions against that kind of stuff.
Yeah, turn location off on your phone when you're recording your
Yep.
Instagram stuff and TikTok
Yep.
videos and whatever.
All that
When you're
stuff.
coming back from activism, this isn't like some crazy spy thriller where you're having to make sure there aren't people weaving in and out of traffic. But
No.
if you just came back from a massive display, maybe make sure that you're not being followed by the exact group of hooligans that were counter protesting your event. That
You
sort
should
of thing.
always look in your rearview mirror when you leave outreach. And if you need to find an alternative way back to your whatever location you're operating out of, by
Yep.
all means do that. These are
Yep.
basic things that you
Thanks.
can do to try to mitigate against, some bad actors out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Last kind of area that we'll dive into in the kind of tech and IT world before we get into some general
Mm-hmm.
themes to wrap up here, Mark. You guys have done a lot of work with your website. I think that you have one of the better pro-life websites out there when it comes
Appreciate
to
that.
usability, mobile version, desktop version, all that kind of stuff. What kind of IT security might be worth keeping in mind, not only so that your website doesn't get taken down, but so that you're
Right.
not losing access to sensitive information, whether through your email, through your Google Drive, through different things like that? What kind of IT security might be relevant for people to keep in mind?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a tech person, but we learned the lesson about a year and a half ago here in the U.S. when a lot of companies were canceling conservative organizations, Parler being one who, social media site got taken down because they hosted it on Amazon servers. Bad idea. Don't do that. Find a company, or if you do it in-house, that you can rely on, that isn't going to cancel you, that's a friendly. If you do host your website off-site, find a friendly company to your, to the pro-life message and host it there, or host it on your own website and back it up, or in your own location. And then make sure you have a backup to that thing continually happening. So if you do get attacked, a cyber attack by a hacker, you have the backup.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure this is a little bit old school, but as much as cloud services are great for backing up content, it's tough to go wrong with a hard backup, whether that's a server, whether that's a thumb drive, whether that's a massive stack of terabyte hard drives and whatnot. Back your stuff up so that if you get attacked and if we get deplatformed by something, I don't want to be fear-mongering around the Microsoft Offices and the Googles and whatnot too much, but I think it's important to realize that these people certainly aren't our friends. They might not quite be our full-blown enemies quite yet, but it's not like you're going to have a personal line to Mr. Bill Gates himself, and he'll be like, oh, okay, Mark, I understand where you're coming from. I'll give you access back to your OneDrive sort of thing. Cloud stuff is great for regular use, but a solid hard drive or a server system that's in-house is really valuable as well, right?
Yeah. Also, I'd say antivirus software. Make sure that every machine you have in the building is up to date on that. So you can't, you can't plant a virus somehow. We use encrypted communications. That's important as well with your phones, whether it be text or phone calling, as much as possible doing that. Firewalls with your network. These are important things. And then just be wary of emails that you receive that are phishing emails. Don't click on them. I mean, be able to detect these, because that's sometimes how they gain access to some of your technology. So these are just basic stuff that you can just communicate with your people to keep your eyes on. Whether you're doing this as an organization or individually, these are the types of things that we should be doing to protect ourselves.
Exactly. And like you had mentioned beforehand, when it came to people who are hanging around your outreach displays in a kind of a weird, unexpected kind of way, same thing goes with this, that not often anymore are we getting the African prince emailing us asking for a particular volume of rubies anymore. Time and time again, it's an email from a Mark Harrington that is asking like, hey, can you check this video for me to make sure that it's okay? And okay, well, Mark's never sent me a video to check on before. Maybe I shouldn't click on this kind of thing. I've gotten several of them from pastors at my church where they've gotten hacked into somehow. And okay, well, why is my priest asking for iTunes gift cards right now or something like that? Like be aware of things that don't strike you quite right. If your pastor is constantly asking for iTunes gift cards, normally, I mean, maybe there's other questions to be asked there, but certainly if they don't ask you very often, that should stand out as something kind of odd.
Right. Anything that stands out, take a minute, pause, ask somebody else, make sure you don't do anything, on the spur of the moment.
Gotcha. Last thing I want to pick your brain on is just kind of overarching. I've had this, I don't know if you're a big Lord of the Rings kind of guy. I'm a bit of a Lord of the Rings guy. And for a moment, I was thinking of that scene where Pippin and Gandalf are standing on the like patio in Minas Tirith looking at the fire blazing. And talking about how this battle is upcoming, and I just wish that I could get through it. The worst part about it is standing on the edge of a battle that I can't avoid. And then it dawned on me that like we're not provoking battle. This isn't like a conventional war where the pro-lifers have this coming and it's been years in the works. I know that abortion advocates have been trying to frame it that way, that they're simply working defensively. I think maybe let's just close a little bit on the attitude that pro-lifers should be going into this. Pro-lifers shouldn't have to expect violence in this. Pro-lifers shouldn't feel like they were the ones who started this and now we're having a drag them out, punch them up kind of battle. Pro-lifers are here because we want a better option for moms and dads. We want to stop killing children to try to solve our problems. What kind of attitude do you try to steep your team members in as they engage in activism that unfortunately is probably experiencing a higher rate of incidents, how do you keep them grounded in a polarization doesn't help us? As soon as I make them my enemies, then I've already lost half the battle. What kind of message do you try to impart with your team so that they maintain an attitude of productive engagement with the general public and not fearful opposition, I guess?
Well, we should come to expect the kind of behavior we're seeing. And therefore, when it happens, we're not shocked by it. And understand that those who dismember children will also likely resort to some other types of violence or other illegal acts. I mean, that's just goes with the territory. I think the fact that we have gone 50 years relatively untouched in this country is by the grace of God. I mean, it's just now that we're beginning to see an uptick in all of this. And so we just need to say, hey, we signed up for this. I mean, we didn't know, and we weren't inviting it. We weren't saying, hey, we want this to come, but we knew what could come our way because of the people we're dealing with. But we also need to keep in mind that these are people acting out of hurt, anger, trying to express their disagreement with us in ways that are very disagreeable. But on the one hand, we don't want to tolerate it, but on the other, we got to understand where they're coming from. Now, of course, somebody that's going to take and assassinate our Supreme Court justice, there's no room. They need to be put away forever. But some of these people are just, as I say, some of the ones that come by on our campus outreaches, they're not thinking, they're just being stupid. The other ones that are premeditating the acts, which we're seeing, that's a different story. We need to take it very seriously. I don't want to scare our team. I don't want to scare the pro-life movement, the people that I know. But I basically have said this lately. It's time to hunker down. Now, I got criticized for that a little bit because people say, no, this is the time to go forth and take more ground. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But let's get through the next month. Keep your head low right now. Keep your head low. And let's get through this next month because we know what's coming. And then when it settles down, which it will, within weeks or months, it'll settle back down a little bit. We can go back to the work. Doesn't mean we stop, but we don't want to be stupid about it and aggravate them further. So that's what we're doing. We're just taking precautions like everybody else should. The work continues, but keep your head down.
I think that's brilliant. And that actually reminds me of a question I wanted to ask you. Again, not to give too much time to this Jane's Revenge, but I know that they had put out a lot of info about this June 20th night of pro-life abortion rage kind of thing. It's safe to say that you guys aren't planning on doing choice chain in the middle of those streets and hunting those people out.
No, that would be stupid.
That would be stupid.
That'd
yes.
be very stupid.
That would be dumb. That is not our target audience right now.
No.
Those are not the people that we're trying to convert necessarily in that moment. That is not prudent. That is not wise. That is downright stupid. Please do not exacerbate things by trying to seek out those people in your city and getting attacked by them. Because, Mark, I'm sure that you would echo the sentiments that a pro-lifer's time and energy is far more valuable almost always on a street corner, on a doorstep, having a meaningful conversation rather than recovering in a hospital bed after an incident like that, right?
Right. I mean, having said that, we are going to Washington, and if you happen to be there for the decision, of Dobbs' decision being handed down, we will be there at the front of the Supreme Court on that morning anticipating Dobbs being decided. But that doesn't mean we're going to stay there for 3 or 4 days when the mob increases to 30,000 people and they're totally unruly. No, I mean, we're there to mark the moment and then, do our thing. We'll go back to work the next day. And I think that's the way we need to approach this.
Love it. I think there's tremendous wisdom in that, and Godspeed with you and the team heading out there. Yeah. That's everything I had on my list. I'm sure Peter would have had a few other questions for you. Anything else that you figure we should talk about before we wrap this up?
We should be considering this. I talked to our team this week because we celebrated, I guess we marked the D-Day invasion, which was 78 years ago on Monday, where it's the largest land invasion in American history. And it was just really the beginning of the ground war in Europe. It took several years, of course, to actually end the war completely. But I kind of compare this metaphorically only to the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and that is we've been looking for that beachhead for a long time. We may be this close to having it here in the United States, and that would be a paradigm shift as to the debate over abortion. And so be praying for that. Our justices are under a whole lot of pressure to cave. They're being threatened. Let's pray that the leaked decision is the final word on this, and we can get on to the work that's ahead of us.
Absolutely. And Mark, you like 4 times through this conversation, you have jogged my memory on things that I wanted to mention. And that brings me to a quote that I love. I'm sure you love it as well. I think it was Winston Churchill. This is not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end. This is the end of the beginning. I think there's tremendous value in that. And that we had a long ways to go as pro-lifers after Roe v. Wade falls. We're not packing up. We're not going home. This is not it. And whether you want to identify with the soldiers storming Normandy, or whether you want to identify with the Irina Sandlers, the Corrie ten Booms, the Sophie Scholes, and others who were engaged in that in a very different way, trying to protect the weak and vulnerable. There's a lot of different metaphors that we can pull out of this, and I think there's a lot of beauty in it. But I maybe let's end it on that quote of "This is not the end. Yeah. This is not the beginning of the end. This is the end of the beginning," as it were.
It's a good word.
All right, folks, that was Mark Harrington, Executive Director and founder of Created Equal. It's always a joy to talk with Mark. He's a brilliant, well-seasoned, and very, very incredible. Just a joy to work with Mark Harrington. And so I hope that you benefited from that. I hope that episode doesn't freak you out. Hopefully that doesn't cause you to run to the hills. Hopefully this is just a few somewhat intuitive, somewhat maybe you haven't thought about them a whole lot before because you never really anticipated this was going to be on the radar for you and your group. Hopefully there's a few very simple, very manageable protocol that you can integrate into your pro-life outreach to ensure that everybody is safe and this conversation continues to change minds, save lives, and transform culture. Because that's what we're in this for. Right? This is, as I mentioned at the end there, this is not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end. This is the end of the beginning. We in the pro-life movement, our highest aim has to be for abortion to no longer be practiced. And while having abortion inaccessible is an angle and a route to get there, there are 2 very, very important arms to go into that as well. The pastoral arm, making abortion unnecessary for every mother. We need to continue to stock and support our local pregnancy care centers. And the foundation of the pro-life movement, I would argue, is that educational arm, making abortion unthinkable. By changing hearts and minds on the abortion issue, whether with pregnant moms or whether before people even become pregnant, we are turning their path towards pregnancy care centers and towards pro-life politicians before they even become pregnant, so that if they find themselves in a challenging situation, they already know that abortion is not an appropriate solution to whatever it is that they may be going through. There are better solutions, and there are incredible people at their local pregnancy care center willing and able to help them navigate whatever it is that they're up against. And so let's keep that in mind. Let's remind ourselves that the overturning of Roe v. Wade is not the be-all, end-all. It's hopefully a beautiful and important step towards protecting preborn children. And yet, this is not the end goal. Neither the end goal in America nor around the world. This is certainly going to impact the abortion conversation where I am in Canada here. It's going to impact the conversation where you are, wherever that may be. And I hope that you can be emboldened to continue this important ministry. As I mentioned at the end there, whether you identify with the soldiers storming Normandy, or whether you identify with somebody like Irina Sandler, who rescued over 1,000 Jewish orphans, whether you identify with Nicholas Winton, a man who was able to rescue over 600 Jewish orphans and bring them to the safety of England during the Second World War, whether you identify with these people who lived and breathed protection and defense of the weak and vulnerable, I certainly don't identify as somebody who's taking up arms against the pro-abortion movement. I hope and pray that I would have had the courage to take up arms in the First and Second World War. I have no idea if I would have. What I do know is that I need to continue doing whatever I can to protect the weak and vulnerable. And as we mentioned off the top, and as I mentioned time and time again, the pro-life movement, CCBR, the Pro-Life Guys podcast, Mark Harrington, I speak on behalf of an awful lot of people. We absolutely and unequivocally condemn all forms of abortion-related violence. This cannot be met with blow for blow. This cannot be met with revenge and payback and all these kinds of things. If you find that would be cathartic, then give me a call. Please, please, please do not go out and vent your anger over the last 50 years of bloodshed around this issue by shedding more blood. Let's not go into this. Let's not give them, I don't know if it's giving them what they want, but let's not turn this into a me versus you. Those who are advocating in favor of abortion are not our enemies. Our enemies are powers and principalities, not the individuals that are confronting us. They need to be met with love, with charity, with support, with understanding. And that doesn't mean not protecting yourself. That does not mean allowing yourself to be harmed and impacted, whether you're willing to endure that or not. Please consider those around you, those others in the movement right now and in the future. But please, 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 let's meet this with genuine Christian love. Let's meet this with charity. Let's meet this with grace. Let's meet this with courage. Let's continue engaging in our pro-life and outreach. Let's continue supporting moms and dads. Let's continue our political action. But let's not do this in a confrontational way. Let's not try to bring upon ourselves the rage and frustration that is probably going to come about after this ruling is released. Let's be wise. Let's be prudent. Let's follow the guidance and suggestions of Mark Harrington. So thanks a ton. If you have any questions, if you need support, if you need help, if you just need somebody to help you cool off, if you're feeling incredibly frustrated, please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms. I'm sure Mark is happy to help as well, but you can hit me up, ccote@endthekilling.ca, or email at prolifeguys.com. I'll try to get you back as quick as possible. But please, let's take this opportunity to build a culture of life, not in the fruity, flowery kind of way, but in the deep, profound kind of way where all human life is valued and protected, and we continue our ministry. So thanks a ton. Thank you for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys again next week. Thanks so much, and God bless.